Fox News. She went in there dripping with condescension. 15 minutes late.
For years, Bill O'Reilly was one of the most powerful and recognizable faces in American television. As the host of The O'Reilly Factor on Fox News, he commanded millions of nightly viewers and built a reputation as a tough, no-nonsense commentator who thrived on confrontation. To the public, he projected the image of a confident, principled man who valued family and traditional values above all else. But behind closed doors, the picture was far more complicated. His marriage to Maureen McPhilmy, which began in 1996 and produced 2 children, seemed stable from the outside. Yet cracks were forming long before the public knew. What unfolded over the next decade was a storm of personal conflict, legal battles, and shocking allegations that would ultimately end in divorce. And when it happened fast. O'Reilly's wife divorced him immediately after an incident that shattered whatever remained of their marriage. The man who preached family values on national television now found his own family torn apart in the most public, humiliating way imaginable. The story of Bill O'Reilly's divorce is not just about the end of a marriage, it's about power, reputation, and the devastating consequences when private turmoil collides with public image. It's about how one of the most influential men in media found himself battling not only scandal, but also his own family in court. This is the untold, dramatic story of how Bill O'Reilly's marriage unraveled and why his wife walked away for good. In the mid-1990s, Bill O'Reilly was riding high. After years of working his way through television journalism, starting as a local reporter and later as a host for programs like Inside Edition, he found his true calling at Fox News. In 1996, the same year the network launched, O'Reilly debuted The O'Reilly Factor. Within a few short years, the show became the crown jewel of the network, cementing O'Reilly as one of the most influential voices in conservative media. That same year, he also made what seemed to be the perfect step in his personal life, marrying Maureen McPhilmy, a public relations executive. From the outside, their union appeared stable, even enviable. O'Reilly often spoke on air about the importance of family values, traditional marriage, and discipline in raising children. The couple eventually had 2 children together, a daughter and a son. To fans, the O'Reillys looked like the embodiment of conservative ideals. He was the tough but principled media star, she was the polished and professional wife, and together they represented the kind of nuclear family that O'Reilly often praised. But behind the polished exterior, there were signs that all was not well. Friends and acquaintances of the couple later revealed that the marriage was strained almost from the beginning. O'Reilly's demanding career kept him away from home for long stretches of time. His on-air persona, confrontational, domineering, and uncompromising, was not always an act. At home, those traits sometimes spilled into family life, creating tension that grew over the years. Maureen, for her part, tried to maintain normalcy for the sake of their children. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, strong-willed, and patient. But living with a man as polarizing and intense as Bill O'Reilly came with unique challenges. He was a figure who thrived on control, in his professional environment and, according to later accounts, in his personal life as well. As O'Reilly's fame skyrocketed in the early 2000s, the pressures on their marriage mounted. Publicly, O'Reilly's brand depended on the image of a disciplined, family-oriented man. Privately, however, the cracks were widening. Arguments became more frequent. Disagreements grew harder to reconcile. By the late 2000s, those close to the couple began to sense that the marriage was on the verge of collapse. Still, divorce seemed unthinkable, at least to O'Reilly. As a staunch Catholic and vocal defender of traditional family structures, he frequently criticized divorce on his program. To admit that his own marriage was failing would not only be personally painful, but also professionally damaging. For years, he fought to keep up appearances, presenting the world with the image of stability even as his private life unraveled. But by 2010, the strain had become unbearable. Maureen began to distance herself, quietly preparing for what would be an explosive break. Friends noticed she appeared less frequently at O'Reilly's side, and the warmth between them had faded. Behind closed doors, the relationship had reached a breaking point. The public wouldn't know it yet, but the O'Reilly household was on the brink of a scandal that would forever shatter Bill's carefully crafted image. The man who built a career, preaching family values, was about to see his own family disintegrate in a way that would shock even his most loyal viewers. The early years of O'Reilly's marriage had painted a picture of success, stability, and shared values, but the reality was far more fragile. And when the breaking point finally came, it would not only end the marriage, it would expose the darker side of Bill O'Reilly's personal life for the entire world to see. By 2010, the cracks in Bill O'Reilly's marriage to Maureen McPhilmy had widened into unbridgeable gaps. Their home life, once shielded from the public eye, was unraveling rapidly. O'Reilly's career remained at its peak. The O'Reilly factor continued to dominate cable news ratings, but behind the scenes, his marriage was collapsing under the weight of anger, mistrust, and, as court documents would later reveal, disturbing allegations. The breaking point came in the form of an incident that Maureen could not ignore. According to accounts presented in custody proceedings, O'Reilly's behavior at home had grown increasingly volatile. A moment of explosive anger allegedly crossed into physical intimidation. In sworn testimony years later, their teenage daughter described witnessing her father dragging her mother down a staircase by the neck. The allegation was shocking, not only because of its violent nature, but also because it clashed so dramatically with the image O'Reilly projected to his millions of viewers. For Maureen, this was the final straw. Whatever love or patience had held the marriage together was gone. In April 2010, she filed for divorce, citing irretrievable breakdown of the relationship. To those close to her, the decision had been a long time coming. But when it happened, it was immediate and decisive. She could no longer live under the same roof as Bill O'Reilly. The divorce quickly grew ugly. O'Reilly, a man who thrived on confrontation, was unwilling to go quietly. He denied the allegations of abuse, calling them fabricated and exaggerated. Yet the testimony of their daughter carried heavy weight. For Maureen, ensuring her children's safety and emotional well-being became her top priority. The scandalous details that emerged during the divorce proceedings shocked the public when they became known. O'Reilly, the self-styled champion of family values, was accused of behavior that painted a far darker picture of his private life. His attempts to maintain control of the narrative mirrored the tactics he often used on air: denial, aggression, and counterattacks. But in the courtroom, his words carried less sway than they did on television. One of the most dramatic revelations came in 2014, when reports of the alleged staircase incident surfaced. The daughter's testimony had been sealed in court documents, but once it leaked, it dominated headlines. For O'Reilly, the damage was immediate. Even for fans willing to forgive his political controversies, the idea that he had harmed his wife in front of their child was impossible to ignore. At the heart of the divorce was a bitter custody battle over their children. O'Reilly sought joint custody, but Maureen resisted, citing concerns about his temper and stability. The legal fight dragged on for years, filled with accusations and counter-accusations. Ultimately, the court sided with Maureen, granting her full residential custody of the children. It was a decisive blow to O'Reilly, both personally and publicly. For Maureen, the divorce was not only about leaving a broken marriage, it was about reclaiming her life and protecting her children. Friends described her as resilient, determined, and unwilling to back down, even against one of the most powerful media figures in the country. For O'Reilly, the loss was more than personal. It signaled the beginning of a broader unraveling of his once unshakable empire. The incident that drove Maureen to leave was a private moment of violence, but its fallout became very public. Once it surfaced, O'Reilly could never again fully control the image he had so carefully crafted. His wife's immediate departure was more than a divorce. It was an unmasking, the first crack in a facade that would crumble further in the years ahead. The divorce may have marked the end of Bill O'Reilly and Maureen McPhilmy's marriage, but it was only the beginning of a storm that would engulf both their lives. What unfolded after 2010 was not just a legal separation, it was a bitter war fought in courtrooms, the press, and the public imagination. At stake was not only the couple's children, but also O'Reilly's carefully cultivated public image. Almost immediately, the divorce turned into a custody battle. O'Reilly, who had long prided himself on projecting an image of stability and traditional family values, refused to cede ground easily. He fought for joint custody, insisting that he was a loving father unfairly maligned by accusations. But Maureen pushed back, armed with testimony and legal documents that painted a very different picture of life inside their home. One of the most explosive moments in the custody case was the testimony of the couple's teenage daughter. Her account of witnessing her father physically assaulting her mother, allegedly dragging her down a staircase by the neck, was devastating. For a judge, such testimony could not be ignored. For the public, once the details leaked years later, it permanently altered the way many viewed O'Reilly. Still, O'Reilly wielded significant resources. He retained powerful lawyers, tapped his wealth, and even leveraged his connections within the Catholic Church, where he sought annulment proceedings against Maureen. In what many observers saw as an attempt to punish her further, he reportedly accused her of violating their custody agreement by introducing their children to her new partner, an NYPD detective whom she later married. This tactic, however, backfired. Instead of discrediting Maureen, it reinforced the narrative that O'Reilly was controlling, vindictive, and unwilling to let go. The legal war dragged on for years. Each hearing brought new revelations, new accusations, and fresh media attention. For O'Reilly, the courtroom became another battleground, but unlike on his television show, he could not cut off his opponents, shout them down, or edit the footage to his liking. In court, evidence and testimony spoke louder than spin. By 2016, the custody fight had reached its conclusion. A judge awarded Maureen full residential custody of their two children, a resounding defeat for O'Reilly. Though he retained visitation rights, the ruling signaled a clear lack of confidence in his ability to provide a stable environment. To his critics, it was vindication. To his supporters, it was a painful reminder that even their champion of family values was human and deeply flawed. But the personal loss was only part of the fallout. Professionally, O'Reilly's star began to dim. While the O'Reilly Factor remained the highest-rated show on Fox News, cracks were forming. Advertisers grew uneasy with the controversies swirling around his name. The very qualities that had once made him indispensable, his bombast, his refusal to back down, his aura of dominance, were now being questioned in light of the revelations from his divorce. Maureen, meanwhile, began to rebuild her life away from the spotlight. She remarried in 2012 and focused on providing stability for her children. Unlike her ex-husband, she had no interest in public spectacle. Friends described her as grounded, humble, and determined to protect her family's privacy. For her, the divorce had been a chapter to close, not a headline to extend. Yet for O'Reilly, the bitter aftermath lingered. The custody battle and allegations of abuse became a permanent shadow. Every time he invoked morality or family values on air, critics seized on his past. Every time he attacked others for personal failings, his own were dredged back up. The man who had built an empire on his ability to dominate and control narratives was now, in many ways, losing control of his own. The divorce had stripped away more than just his marriage. It chipped at the armor he wore on television. Behind the booming voice and pointed finger, audiences began to see a man whose personal life was chaotic, troubled, and ultimately tragic. And as it turned out, the worst was still yet to come. Bill O'Reilly's divorce from Maureen McPhilmy did more than end a marriage. It was the first major public crack in the armor of one of cable news' most dominant figures. For years, O'Reilly had cultivated an image of moral authority, a staunch defender of family values, a man of principle who spoke truth to power. But the events surrounding his divorce began to reveal a man whose private life told a very different story. In the years following the divorce, allegations of sexual harassment against O'Reilly began to surface, shocking viewers and colleagues alike. Numerous former employees and colleagues accused him of inappropriate behavior, harassment, and coercion. The pattern of behavior suggested that the man who had wielded power with such confidence on air had also abused his influence behind the scenes. For many, the divorce had foreshadowed this moment, a glimpse of control, volatility, and disregard for others that would later engulf his professional life. Fox News, once O'Reilly's fortress, faced mounting pressure as stories multiplied. Advertisers began pulling their support and public scrutiny intensified. In April 2017, after settling multiple harassment claims totaling millions of dollars, O'Reilly was forced out of Fox News in what many described as a stunning fall from grace. The highest-paid host in cable news history had lost everything: his platform, his empire, and the untouchable reputation he had carefully constructed over decades. Looking back, it is clear that the divorce played a pivotal role in the unraveling of O'Reilly's life. Maureen's decision to leave him immediately after the violent incident exposed vulnerabilities in his personal life that critics would later connect to his professional misconduct. The divorce not only stripped away the facade of a stable home life, but also highlighted patterns of behavior, anger, control, aggression, that would later manifest in the workplace. For O'Reilly, the personal and professional consequences were intertwined. He had lost his family's support, faced public humiliation, and was forced to confront the reality that his personal failings had caught up with him. Unlike other media personalities who weather scandals, O'Reilly's combination of divorce, public allegations, and corporate fallout created a perfect storm that left him sidelined and largely silenced. Meanwhile, Maureen McPhilmy moved forward with her life. She remarried in 2012 and maintained a private existence, successfully shielding herself and her children from further public scrutiny. Her decision to leave O'Reilly immediately after the violent incident was vindicated by the outcomes that followed. She had preserved her family's safety and dignity while O'Reilly faced public and professional collapse. The story of Bill O'Reilly's divorce is not just a tale of marital breakdown. It is a cautionary story about power, image, and accountability. A man who once projected invincibility on national television was revealed to be deeply flawed in his private life. His wife's decision to leave him immediately after the incident served as the first public signal that all was not as it seemed. The events that followed, from custody battles to harassment scandals to the loss of his television empire, can, in many ways, be traced back to the fracture his personal life experienced that day. Today, Bill O'Reilly remains a polarizing figure. Some still defend him, citing his journalistic contributions and media influence. Others view him as a cautionary tale, a man undone by his own behavior, whose personal failings became inseparable from his professional identity. The divorce, immediate and decisive, was both a turning point and a warning, a signal that even the most powerful men are not immune to the consequences of their private actions. Ultimately, the heartbreak and scandal that followed O'Reilly's divorce illustrate a truth about fame, power, and personal accountability. No image, no matter how carefully constructed, can survive when the private reality is ignored. What started as a domestic rupture ended in a public reckoning, forever altering the life of one of America's most famous media personalities.